You said you're going to start.
We're going to start the teaching. 22. All right.
Oh, Joshua. We're in Joshua.
Verses 1 through 6. I'm going to read them, and we're going to talk about them, okay?
Wait a minute, I'm not there yet. Hold on a minute.
That is in the Old Testament.
It is.
I missed a week.
It's in the front.
It's right after Joshua 21. All right, let me read. Then Joshua summoned the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, and he said to them, "You have kept all that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, and you have listened to my voice in all that I commanded you. You have not forsaken your brother these many days to this day, but have kept the charge of the commandment of the Lord your God. And now the Lord your God has given rest to your brothers, and as he spoke to them, therefore turn now and go to your tents, to the land of your possession, which Moses the servant of the Lord gave you beyond the Jordan. Only be careful to observe the commandment and the law which Moses the servant of the Lord commanded you, to love the Lord your God, and to walk in all his ways, and to keep his commandments, and to hold fast to him, and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul." So Joshua blessed them and sent them away, and they went to their tents. Okay? Now, what's going on here? What's going on is, we see here in Numbers 32, verses 1 through 6, there was this incident that's recorded in the Torah, that as they were moving towards the land of Canaan and moving towards the Jordan River, the 2.5 tribes that we just talked about, the Gadites, the Reubenites, and half the tribe of Manasseh, they had accumulated a large amount of cattle, livestock, okay, and they said to Moses, "Could we have our inheritance on the east side of the Jordan?" So Moses went to the Lord, and the Lord said, "Yes, but you must join the others as part of the overall military and help them clear out the land, and then you can have your inheritance." So this is exactly what's happening here. They have done what they said they were going to do. They have fulfilled their commitment and their military service, and therefore Joshua now releases them and says, "Go back on the east side of the Jordan, go back to your families." So we know that this is at least 7 and probably more than 8 years that they've been away from their families, these fighting men. They haven't seen their children for 7 and 8, or maybe somewhat even more than that, years. So they made some significant sacrifices. Now the only qualification Joshua gave them was one. What is it? Verse 5. Only be careful to observe the commandments and the law. In other words, he says, remember the teaching of the Torah, and especially remember Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 through 9. It's called the Shema. You shall love the Lord with all your heart, with all your soul, with all the strength, with all your mind. You shall follow him in all his ways. It's called the Shema or Shema. It's a very famous passage that's quoted over and over again in Jewish synagogues. So he reminds them of the Shema and says, this is your operative direction, okay? Keep this always in your mind as you go back. So then he sends them to go ahead and do what they hadn't done for a long time, and that's everybody who had been traveling west in the conquest, and now he says to them, it's time for you to travel east and go back home. Now, let's read verses 7 through 9. Now to the 1/2 tribe of Manasseh, Moses had given a possession Bashan, but to the other half Joshua gave a possession among their brothers westward beyond the Jordan. So when Joshua sent them away to their tents, he blessed them. And he said to them, return to your tents with great riches and with very much livestock and with silver and gold and bronze and iron and with very many clothes. Divide your spoil of your enemies with your brothers. And the sons of Reuben, the sons of Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh returned home and departed from the sons of Israel at Shiloh, which is where the tabernacle was set up, which is in the land of Canaan, to go to the land of Gilead, that is, east of the Jordan, to the land of their possession, which they had possessed according to the commandment of the Lord through Moses. So, they begin their journey back east now, to go across the Jordan River and to get on the east side. But again, Joshua says, but there's something you need to do and keep in mind in the process. And what are they told to do?
Share.
Right.
Yeah, share what they've taken in their fighting,
Exactly, the spoils of war.
Right. They're to share that with everybody.
Correct. Where? Everyone where?
On the east side.
Correct, on the east side. In other words, he's saying you have gained the spoils of war. And he mentions all these things they've gained. He says, but back home, your relatives, your wives, your children, etc., they have, in essence, I'm putting it this way, they've prayed for you, they've guarded this area for you, they've guarded the livestock that were there, they've built things, they've maintained, and they've made a life for you to go back to. So he says, therefore, make certain when you go back, it's almost an allusion to the tithe again. You see? Take what you have and bless them with part of what it is that you've accumulated in the process of the warfare. So again, he's teaching them, be appreciative. Be appreciative. All right. Verses 10 through 19. Let's read these. And when they came to the region of the Jordan, which is in the land of Canaan, the sons of Reuben, the sons of Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh built an altar there by the Jordan. And underline these words, a large altar in appearance. And the sons of Israel heard it. And behold, the sons of Reuben, the sons of Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh have built an altar at the frontier of the land of Canaan, that is the Jordan River, in the region of the Jordan, on the side belonging to the sons of Israel, that is the west side of the Jordan, the west bank of the Jordan River. Okay?
That's where they built it.
That's where they built it.
On the west side.
On the west side. And when the sons of Israel heard it, the whole congregation of the sons of Israel, that is the other 9.5 tribes we're talking about, gathered themselves at Shiloh to go up against them in war. Then the sons of Israel sent to the sons of Reuben and to the sons of Gad and to the half-tribe of Manasseh into the land of Gilead, Phinehas, the son of Eleazar the priest. Eleazar was the high priest, his son Phinehas. And with him 10 chiefs, one chief from each father's household, from each of the tribes of Israel. Each one of them was the head of his father's household among the thousands of Israel. In other words, if you want to put it, a prince of a tribe of Israel. Okay? This was a delegation. Okay? And he says, verse 15, and they came to the sons of Reuben, to the sons of Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, to the land of Gilead, and they spoke with them, saying, thus says the whole congregation of the Lord, the 9.5 tribes, what is this unfaithful act which you have committed against the God of Israel, turning away from following the Lord this day by building yourselves an altar to rebel against the Lord this day? Is it not the iniquity of Peor enough for us, from which we have not cleansed ourselves to this day, although a plague came on the congregation of the Lord, so that you must turn away this day from following the Lord? And it will come about, if you rebel against the Lord today, that he will be angry with the whole congregation of Israel tomorrow. If, however, the land of your possession is unclean, then cross into the land of the possession of the Lord, where the Lord's tabernacle stands, in other words, back over to the west side, over to the west side of the Jordan, and take possession among us. Only do not rebel against the Lord, or rebel against us by building an altar for yourselves besides the altar of the Lord our God. there was only one altar you could sacrifice on. It was called the brass or brazen altar. The only place in the tabernacle that you could make sacrifice. Okay? They built what apparently, out of stone, not out of bronze, okay, a massive replica of the bronze altar out of stone. And they built it and situated it on the bank of the west side of the Jordan River. Okay? Therefore, the assumption of the 9.5 tribes is they're going to start their own sacrifice. They're going to break from the clear commandment of the Lord, the clear commandment of the tabernacle, everything that God laid down all the way through the Torah of the proper system of sacrifice. They're going to break away.
Why did they build it on the west side?
Well, you'll see.
Okay.
We're getting there.
Well, they're just plain bad.
Okay. So, what we find, well, let's go a little bit further. Okay? So now you see the problem.
Mm-hmm.
This is why I call it the misunderstanding.
Mm-hmm.
Now they go on a little further. Let's go ahead and read a little bit further, and then we'll take this. Did not Achan, the son of Zerah, act unfaithfully in the things under the ban, and wrath on all of the congregation of Israel? And that man did not perish alone in his iniquity. Remember the story of Achan? Okay. And his whole family group ended up dying because of what he did. Now, look at the response here over the next couple of verses, and then we'll discuss this. Then the sons of Reuben, the sons of Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh answered and spoke to the heads of the families of Israel. The mighty one, the God, the Lord, the mighty one God, God the Lord, literally in the Hebrew uses 3 different names of God. In other words, we swear to the mighty one of Israel, the God, the Lord, and God the mighty one. That is literally of the universe. Okay. He says he knows, and may Israel itself know. It was not in rebellion, or an unfaithful act against the Lord. If it is rebellion, or an unfaithful act against the Lord, then do not save us this day. If we have built us an altar to turn away from following the Lord, or if to offer burnt offerings or grain offerings on it, or if to offer sacrifices or peace offerings on it, may the Lord himself require it. That is, like our death, our judgment. Okay? But truly we have done this out of concern, for a reason, saying, now here's their reason, in time to come your sons may say to our sons, what have you to do with the Lord, the God of Israel? For the Lord has made the Jordan a border between us and you. Your sons of Reuben and sons of Gad, you have no portion in the Lord. So your sons may make our sons stop fearing the Lord. Okay? Now let's go through this. You see here that the 2.5 tribes, out of anxiety because of their distance from Shiloh and the tabernacle and the main area of Israel, the 9.5 tribes on the west side, okay, they're fearful that over time both the offspring of the 9.5 tribes and the offspring of their own children may dissociate from each other. They may not consider the 2.5 tribes part of Israel anymore. Mm-hmm. They may not include them as their national group anymore. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's what they're saying the problem. So they decide to memorialize their unity with the west side, the 9.5 tribes, by building this memorial altar, and that's literally what they call it, a memorial altar. Now, this had 2 problems to it. Okay, first of all, and it was a major problem, God had not ordered them to do it. And there's a secondary issue to that. They built one big altar. Okay, and it gave the impression to the 9.5 tribes, therefore, that they were going to sacrifice on it and make their own religious system as a result. All right? That's the first problem. The second problem was there already had been a memorial altar of stones built on the west bank.
Yeah, when they crossed.
Joshua 4, verses 6 and 7.
Yeah.
In the middle of the dry Jordan,
Yeah.
Before they went to Gilgal.
before they went to Gilgal, God says, take a man from each tribe of Israel, pick up a big stone, bring it over to the west side, pile them together, and this is a memorial altar of the Lord, quote, for all time for Israel, to memorialize the crossing of the Jordan, the miracle of the crossing of the Jordan. So there's already an altar there. And that one was designed by God and was ordered by God, but this one was not.
Mm-hmm.
So I make the point, their motive that may have been pure, but their method was a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And they claimed their motive was pure. And I think the evidence
They could
is...
have been lying too.
Pardon?
They could have been lying or not telling the truth or fudging or
They could have.
stretching the truth.
But I think we're going to find out that that's not the case as we go on here, okay? Now, like we said, when it was heard back on the west side of the Jordan by the 9.5 tribes that they built this huge altar, they assumed it was for idolatry. And the 9.5 tribes did an interesting thing. And actually what they did was proper. But we're going to see how they went about it, which is very interesting. They said, in essence, if they are entering into idolatry, we're bringing a war party. There was going to be a civil war that was going to occur because of this. And they give two reasons why they were going to do this. Turn to Numbers 25. You don't have to go too far to the left to get to Numbers 25.
What the story?
Yeah. Numbers 25. We're going to read verses 1 through 9. Starting verse 1. While Israel remained at Shittim, the people began to, quote, play the harlot, which meant literally commit adultery, have fornication, and practice pagan Baal worship, okay? Because Baal worship was a fertility god and goddess worship. And the way they worshipped was to, of course, have proclivity and sexual relations with each other. So they began to play the harlot with the daughters of Moab. So the Moabites were around, and because the Moabites were Baal worshipers, okay? For they invited the people, that is of Israel, to the sacrifices of their gods. And the people ate and bowed down to their gods. In other words, to the Baal and the Asheroth. So Israel joined themselves to Baal of Peor. And the Lord was angry against Israel. And the Lord said to Moses, take all the leaders of the people and execute them in broad daylight before the Lord, because of this rampant idolatry, so that the fierce anger of the Lord may turn away from Israel. So Moses said to the judges of Israel, these appointed men, okay, says, each of you slay his man who has joined himself to Baal of Peor. Then behold, one of the sons of Israel came and brought to his relatives a Midianite woman in the sight of Moses and in the sight of the congregation to the sons of Israel. She, of course, is a Baal worshiper, while they were weeping at the door of the tent of meeting. Now, notice this. When Phinehas, didn't we just hear about him? Mm-hmm. He heads the delegation that's going over to conduct an investigation about what's going on with the 2.5 tribes. Same guy. So when Phinehas, he's a younger man now, okay, the son of Eleazar, the high priest, the son of Aaron, saw it, he arose from the midst of the congregation and took a spear in his hand, and he went after the man of Israel into the tent and pierced both of them, that is the man and the woman, through the man of Israel and the woman, through the body. Now notice why. So that the plague on the sons of Israel was checked. Verse 9, and those who died by the plague were 24,000. Within a very short period of time, God unleashed a plague for judgment upon them for this idolatry, and 24,000 of them were killed by the plague.
I suppose he did consult God.
Of course he did. But Phinehas was the one that ended the plague by doing this. Okay? So he has a reputation about knowing what to do about idolatry. He's the guy they send with the others. Okay, so let's go back to Joshua now. I say here, and we won't look at it, but in 1 Corinthians 5:6, Paul quotes from the Old Testament and says, "A little leaven leavens the whole lump of dough." This is the principle. You let sin build, continue, multiply. In fact, you get more and more of it, and you get more and more consequences as a result.
A little bit of sin
Ends up being a huge amount eventually. So the 9.5 tribes were correctly concerned about what I've termed here, quote, correct doctrine. They insisted all Israel lived by the Torah. But they weren't just doctrinally correct people. They also were wise and compassionate in their concern. Okay? You don't have to turn here, I'll read it to you. But notice the statement. I'll give you the New Testament equivalent. And this is important for us to understand. It's found in Ephesians 4. Normally speaking, we think of anger and we say it's a bad thing, because the vast majority of the time it is a bad thing. But there is a good version of it.
Yeah, righteous and
Okay? And it's found in Ephesians 4:25-26. Paul says, "Therefore, laying aside falsehood, speak truth, each one of you with his neighbor. For we're members of one another." This is exactly what the Israelites were saying. If you start idolatry, you're not just going to get judged. We're going to get judged too. That's what they're saying. You know, it's not going to be separated just on you. And Paul says, "Therefore, be angry." It's actually an imperative command, but do not sin. And do not let the sun go down on your anger. Resolve the issue. Okay? So the point is here, there is a rightful place for confrontation. There is a rightful place in love to go to your fellow Christian and say, "I see this going on, and it concerns me." Now, and we're going to talk about this more as we go into the story more. Okay? Now, so the delegation is sent. Instead of gossiping, and instead of stirring up the pot, instead of increasing anger towards the 2.5 tribes on the east, and instead of increasing assumptions about what they're doing, they send this delegation to both confront and to listen. Now think about what they do, and think about the principle, and think about what we tend to do. We hear a story. And then Joe Blow says, "Oh, yeah, I heard this about it, too." And then Fred says, "Yeah, you know, I think this is true also." And then Sally says, "I heard this." And before you know it, you got this person that they're talking about committing the most heinous whatever possible things, and everybody's really enjoying it.
You've been listening to too much fake news. In seriousness.
No, well, of course, this is human nature.
Well, tell me the story that's different than the fake news.
Okay.
Isn't it the same thing you're talking
It
about?
is.
It is.
In principle, it is.
But
Okay.
he's talking about the Old Testament.
Yeah.
I understand, but it's the same with the Old Testament as is today.
It is. It is. Now, the church does this constantly. Okay? They do it constantly. You know, they'll say, "Did you hear this about so-and-so?" You know, and they don't do what we're reading today. If they're really concerned, they should shut their mouth to everyone else and pray first and ask the Lord, should I go talk with them? And what's my motive for talking to them? Am I trying to get juicy gossip for the rest of the group here? Or am I truly concerned for them? Am I truly concerned for what is best for them? Okay? And in humility, if the Lord says go, then we must go. But I go to them, not to 10 of their friends. Okay? I go to them and I say, "Brother or sister, this has concerned me. Let's talk." All right? and then you listen to what they say. This is what the delegation did, as we're going to see as we read more here. They were wise in what they did. So they send this delegation. They both confront and listen. I want to mention, and turn here if you would. Go all the way. Keep your hand in Joshua, but go over to 1 Corinthians 6. We're going to read verses 1 through 5. Here's Paul using the very same principle in relationship to the New Testament church. He says, does any one of you, when he has a case against his neighbor, an issue, a problem, a conflict, notice what he says, dare to go to law before the unrighteous and not before the saints? In other words, do you dare to immediately file a lawsuit against your fellow Christian before you've gone and tried to resolve the issue with them? Okay? He says, verse 2, or do you not know that it is the saints, okay, who will judge the world? Who is it that one day is going to judge the fallen angels? Who is it one day that's going to wreak a judgment on the demons? Who is it that's going to condemn Satan, the false prophet, and the Antichrist?
Hello.
We will. God will say, all right, all you saved ones, look at all the testimony, and what's the verdict? We will be the ones who condemn them to eternal hell.
Who takes them out?
Who takes them out, exactly.
Who does?
God do it? Well, God collects them all together.
Or do we have to be involved with that?
We will be the judge and jury. He will be the jailer. He's the jailer. He's the prisoner. He makes the prison for them.
He's the warden.
He's the warden. Okay? All right. So he says, if you're going to do that, can you not make decisions of problems between you and your fellow Christian? He says, and look what he says, and if the world is judged by you, are you not competent to constitute the smallest of courts? Can you not figure these things out in a peaceful way? That's what he's saying. He says, do you not know that we shall judge angels, verse 3, how much more the matters of this life? If then you have law courts dealing with matters of this life, do you appoint them as judges who are of no account to the church? And then he says, I say this to your shame. Is it not so? Is there not among you one wise man who will be able to decide between his brethren? You know, it's a strong sting here by Paul about the church. He's saying you have the mind of Christ, you have the truth of all the Bible, Torah, prophets, and all the New Testament. Can you not figure this out? You know, and if we had the right attitude, we could. But it has to be the right attitude. The right attitude is not, you know, I'm the king, I'm the judge, I'm going to put my thumb on your neck because I can. That's the wrong attitude. The wrong way to do it, okay? So, this delegation, of course, as we said, was headed up by Phineas, and we saw that he had a background in rooting out idolatry. And so this group, this delegation, demonstrated a correct balance between concern for the truth and compassion. And they showed wisdom in seeking counsel. They showed wisdom in seeking counsel. Let's look at some verses about that in Proverbs. So let's turn to the book of Proverbs here after Psalms. There's a lot of them. I just picked a few of them. There's many of them that are stated here. Let's look first at Proverbs 11. And we're going to look at verse 14.
Are we going back to further back from what you were just teaching in Corinthians?
Yeah. We're going to talk about the issue of counsel, wise counsel, seeking a wise way to approach and deal with people. So Proverbs 11, verse 14, okay? He says, where there is no guidance, the people fall, but in abundance of counselors, there is victory. In other words, one person cannot necessarily totally understand everything. This is why it's preferable to have the wisdom of multiple people, to have their view, okay, their enlightened, prayed for view, so that there can be a consensus on what to do, whatever the situation is.
Purpose of elders in today's church.
Yes, that's one example. Okay, there's many, but again, it's just that go to now from Proverbs 11, go to Proverbs 15 over just a couple pages. And we're going to look at verse 22, Proverbs 15. He says, without consultation, plans are frustrated, but with many counselors, they succeed. Again, similar concept. Go back just a couple pages to Proverbs 12, and let's read verses 17 and 18. I think that this is a particularly interesting comment in Proverbs, starting verse 17 of Proverbs 12. He who speaks truth tells what is right, but a false witness, deceit. There is one who speaks rationally like the thrusts of a sword. In other words, attack, 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 okay? But the tongue of the wise, notice, brings healing. The tongue of the wise brings healing. In other words, Paul says in many places in his epistles, seek for peace. Okay? Let your words be gracious in nature as with salt. Many, many things Paul says if there's any way to figure out the situation peacefully, then do so. Okay? Now, we're going to see a very interesting principle here with this delegation that shows you they had an additional attitude that's very critical. And we're also going to see a characteristic in the 2.5 tribes in their representatives that also was very critical to the real solution of this problem, right? So they demonstrated their love for their brothers by making an offer, by making a sacrifice. Think of it. They offered a sacrifice of their own to try to solve the problem. What was it? You remember reading it?
To move in to their side.
Yes. They said if there's something wrong with your side of the area, your land east of the Jordan, then instead of committed idolatry, move in with us and we'll make space.
Okay, all right.
Okay?
All right.
Now think of it. It's their sacrifice that they start out with in dealing with these others. Mm-hmm. Not their, I am the authority and I'm going to tell you what to do. It's a spirit of sacrifice. It's a spirit of love that they start with. So it's very important to keep this in mind. All right? You don't have to turn here, but I'm going to turn here and read this. I'm going to read from 1 Peter 4, 8, and 9. 1 Peter 4, 8, 9. Here's the New Testament equivalent of what we just said. Above all, keep fervent in your love for one another, because love covers a multitude of sins. Mm-hmm. Famous passage. Okay, it isn't strife that covers a multitude of sins. It isn't arrogance that covers a multitude of sins. It isn't being a know-it-all that covers a multitude of sins. It's the humility of love that makes it right, that appeals to the other. Okay? Okay, now, so they show a beautiful balance between truth and sacrifice and compassion for their fellow believer. Think about it. Truth, sacrifice, compassion for the fellow believer. Now, back to Joshua, and let's read some more verses so we can get through this chapter. Let's pick up. I think we stopped at. It was like. I think we stopped at 22. Yeah, 22, because we're talking about the mighty God, the God of the. Okay, so let's pick up on 23 and let's read through 29. If we have built us an altar to turn away from following the Lord, or if to offer a burnt offering or a grain offering on it, or other sacrifices of peace offerings on it, may the Lord himself require it. In other words, require a judgment upon us, okay? But truly we have done this out of concern, for a reason, saying to ourselves, in time to come, your sons may say to our sons, what have you to do with the Lord, the God of Israel? Verse 25, for the Lord has made the Jordan a border between us, you and your sons of Reuben and sons of Gad, and of course, obviously, half tribe of Manasseh, and you guys have no portion in the Lord. So your sons may make our sons stop fearing the Lord. Verse 26, therefore, we said, let us build an altar, not for burnt offerings or for sacrifices, but rather it shall be a witness between us and you, and between our generations after us, that we are to perform the service of the Lord before him with our burnt offerings and with our peace offerings and with our sacrifices, that your sons may not say to our sons in time to come, you have no portion in the Lord. Therefore, we said, it shall also come about, if they say this to us, to our generations in time to come, then we shall say, see, here's a copy of the altar of the Lord which our fathers made, not for burnt offerings or for sacrifice, rather it is a witness between us and you. Far be it from us that we should rebel against the Lord and turn away from the following of the Lord this day by building an altar for burnt offering, for grain offering, or for sacrifice, besides the altar of the Lord of our God, which is before his tabernacle, in other words, in Shiloh. So, they give their response. The delegation makes their accusation, but a truly remarkable thing happens to the representatives of the 2.5 tribes. They show humility. Okay? They don't say, okay, how dare you? What business do you have talking to us? You know, where are you coming from? We know what we're doing. They're not offended. They're not angry. They're not defensive. They're not resentful. They don't show any of that. They show a true humility. How remarkable. How remarkable. Okay? You know, this is why Christ said in Matthew 7, therefore, take the log out of your own eye first so that you can see clearly, so that then you might take the speck out of your brother's. Who do you start with? Yourself. Okay? Not them. Okay? So they show this attitude of humility. These guys don't get defensive, angry, or nasty, but they respond to what they see as a legitimate concern of the 9.5 tribes, a potential serious misunderstanding. And therefore, in humility and sincerity, they explain their intent and their actions. Okay? They claim, above all, that the Lord of heaven knows their conscience, and they never intended to do wrong. And the altar was meant purely as a memorial marker. Okay? In the Hebrew, it's the word ed, which is pronounced aid, okay, to future generations, to show that all of Israel, whether on the west or east side of the Jordan, was one nation, one faith, and one people. So, interestingly enough, we find that their concern actually had a legitimacy to it. Hold your place in Joshua, but turn to 1 Chronicles, and I want to show you something. History proves them actually to be correct. Go to 1 Chronicles chapter 5. Verses 23. We're going to look at 23 through 26. Okay? This is years later. Probably it is the better part of 400 years later.
Wow.
Okay? Look what happens. Starting verse 23, 1 Chronicles 5. Now the sons of the half tribe of Manasseh lived in the land from Bashan to Baal Hermon and Sinir, which is also called Mount Hermon, and they were numerous. Okay? So we're talking about the east side of the Jordan and north up into what would be today Syria. Okay? That area. Northern Jordan, Syria, that area. It says, verse 24, and these were the heads of their households. Even, and of course then it names the leaders of their households. Mighty men of valor, famous men, heads of their fathers' households. But they acted treacherously against the God of their fathers, and they played the harlot after the gods of the people of the land, whom God had destroyed before them. In other words, he destroyed during the conquest all these peoples, and now they go back and mingle with them and start idolatry again. Verse 26. So the God of Israel stirred up the spirit of Pul, the king of Assyria, even the spirit of Tiglath-Pileser, who was a famous king of Assyria, and they carried them away into exile, namely the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, and brought them to Hala and to the Assyrian cities. Okay? So, years later, this is exactly what happens to them, interestingly enough. And so they, in a sense, they rightly feared idolatry. But their problem was they thought the problem would come from the rest of their brothers on the west side of the Jordan, and it didn't. It came from up north from the Assyrians that led them into idolatry. So, let's read and finish this, verses 30 through 34, back to...
Pick your friend's wife.
Yes, pick your friends right, that's true. So let's finish this off. We're going to read verses 30 through 34. This is the good news. So when Phinehas, the priest, and the leaders of the congregation, even the heads of the families of Israel, who were with him, heard the words which the sons of Reuben, the sons of Gad, and the sons of Manasseh spoke, it pleased them. They felt they heard the truth. And Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the priest, said to the sons of Reuben, the sons of Gad, and sons of Manasseh, now here's the key. Could we only have this as being said of us in our dealings with other people? Today we know that the Lord is in our midst. What's the point?
You did right. You did right.
We solved this honorably. We solved this spiritually. We solved this without acrimony. We solved this without unnecessary anger. You know, it was a win-win situation. We settled it. Right? Could we only say that in all our interactions? He says, because you have not committed this unfaithful act against the Lord, now you have delivered the sons of Israel from the hand of the Lord. In other words, we're not going to have a problem now. There's going to be no judgment. We're good. Verse 32, then Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the priest, and the leaders returned from the sons of Reuben, the sons of Gad from Gilead. They returned back to the west, to Canaan, to the sons of Israel, that is the 9.5 tribes. And they go back and give the 9.5 tribes a report, the delegation. And they say in verse 33, and the word pleased the sons of Israel, and the sons of Israel blessed God, and they did not speak of going up to war with them, to destroy the land in which the sons of Reuben, the sons of Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh were living. Verse 34, and the sons of Reuben, the sons of Gad, called the older witness, aid. For they said, it is a witness between us and the Lord is our God. Mm-hmm. So, they resolved this matter without difficulty. And therefore, they all view this altar they built as a witness, as a testimony, and as an evidence of their unity and of their ability to solve it peacefully. Now, interestingly enough, This word aid, I think, is quite interesting, and we're going to close with this tonight. I want you to turn to Exodus 20, verse 16. I find it interesting as I trace this down how many times this word, we spell ED but pronounce aid, is used.
20.
Exodus 20, verse 16. Here's one of the first uses of it. Okay, except for the fact I just turned to Leviticus, but, okay. Exodus 20:16.
Someone there false witness.
Yes, witness, aid. Read the whole thing.
You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor.
Right. There's the word aid. Go over to
Which one is the
witness. You shall not bear false witness. Okay? Now turn over to your right to Deuteronomy 19.
Can you send a notice to Washington?
Yeah. If I thought it would do any good, I would do it, but I'm afraid they're not on the same wavelength here. Deuteronomy 19:15. Someone got it? Read it out loud. Verse 15, Deuteronomy 19.
A single witness shall not rise up against a man on account of any iniquity or any sin which he has committed.
Okay.
On the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses, a matter shall be confirmed.
Okay. So what's the emphasis here? You must have multiple true witnesses. Multiple true witnesses.
Right.
Okay? Now turn over, there's another thing I'd like to point out.
If you go on to the next part of it.
Yes, go ahead, read it.
Okay, it says, if a malicious witness rises up against a man to accuse him of wrongdoing, then both the men who have the dispute shall stand before the Lord, before the priest and the judges who will be in office in those days.
Right.
So if you lie about, you're going to face.
Right.
Let's put it this way. God was extremely serious about not lying. Extremely. You need to be a good witness. You need to be an accurate witness. You need to be a truthful witness. Okay? Because it depended on other people and a lot of things that you were that way. Now, let's finish this off by looking at 2 verses in Proverbs again. Go to your right, back past Psalms to Proverbs again. And the first one is in Proverbs 6. Proverbs 6. I want to read verses 16 through 19. It's a famous passage. There are 6 things which the Lord hates. Remember this passage?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, 7 which are an abomination to him. A, haughty eyes, arrogance. B, a lying tongue, a false witness. 3, hands that shed blood, innocent blood, murder. Okay? 4th, a heart that devises wicked plans. Okay? 5th, feet that run rapidly to evil. Okay? And then a false witness who utters lies. And one who spreads strife among his brothers. Because if you're not speaking the truth, then you're setting up a situation for lies and strife among people. And then finally, here in Proverbs, go to Proverbs 14, just a few to the right. And I think this is a beautiful image here in Proverbs 14:25. A truthful witness saves lives. There's another way to interpret that too, which is interesting. Another way to interpret it is delivers souls. Okay? Saves lives, delivers souls. But he who speaks lies is treacherous. Okay? The importance of truth. Now, in conclusion, I want you to turn to Isaiah 19, and then we'll stop. So go just a little bit further to the right from where you are in Proverbs. and go to Isaiah 19. Now think about what we just talked about. We talked about a memorial being set up. Okay? We talked about it's called aid. It's called the witness. So I want you to look at Isaiah 19 verses, I'm going to read 18 through 20. This is prophetic. This is speaking of the time of the millennium. Okay? That's the time frame we're talking about here. In that day, 5 cities in the land of Egypt will be speaking the language of Canaan and swearing allegiance to the Lord of hosts. One will be called the city of destruction. Now, we could go off on a topic on this, which I won't. But he's saying that in the millennium, Egypt will become almost a proselyte of Israel. And they're going to be speaking Hebrew also. Isn't it interesting? Yeah, it is. 19. In that day there will be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt, a pillar to the Lord near its border. And it will become a sign and a witness, okay, to the Lord of hosts in the land of Egypt. For they will cry to the Lord because of oppressors, and he will send them a Savior, a champion, and he will deliver them. Who will that be? The Messiah. The Messiah is also called the witness. The witness. Okay? So, that is the 22nd chapter of Joshua. Now, next week, I don't know, we really technically have another 2 topics, so I might have 2 more weeks here, but at any rate.
Prayer and we'll have both voices.
Yes. Okay, so first, Michael, would you close us with prayer?